a thoughtful and methodical way as we ramp up for opening Orange County. We have been working daily, receiving updates from our healthcare experts about the current rate of the virus within our community, and I feel fairly comfortable with moving forward with reopening because of that low positivity rate. As of yesterday, the Department of Health reported that our positivity rate here within Orange County is about 2.8%, which is lower, about half as much as the entire state of Florida, which hovers somewhere around 5.7% in total positivity rate. So Dr. Pino also shared with us that over time, even though we have about 1,850 positive cases in Orange County, active cases remain a fraction of that. 87% of all those who have tested positive have recovered, and that leaves somewhere around 320 people who are still active with the virus in our community. We know that likely there are others who are asymptomatic but are also positive, and so the backdrop of what I'm saying here is that the virus is still alive in our community, which speaks to the necessity that as we reopen, we must balance the safety concerns in this healthcare crisis. Yesterday, I heard a good quote from Dr. Pino, and he said that this is the battle between what is dirty and what is clean. And certainly as we reopen businesses, the focus of this task force is to ensure that we reopen businesses in a clean, safe manner. And so with that, I know that we're going to have a number of presentations today from some of our major theme parks with their plan of actions. I've had the opportunity to preview their presentations, and so I really look forward to the dialogue of the entire body today as we move forward. So with that, let me reiterate that I do appreciate the volunteer time collectively that all of you have contributed to making Orange County successful in the reopening of business and commerce here within our community. And with that, I'm going to turn it over now to Mr. George Argale, co-chair, to lead us forward with the meeting.
Thank you very much, Mayor. Thanks for the update on how we're tracking here in our community. That is great news, and it's really a reflection of the efforts, basically with your leadership and your team, that's helped position us to where we can be today with a very strong agenda and some important presentations again. So once again, on behalf of my co-chair, Tim Giuliani, and myself, pleasure to welcome all of our task force members back to address this great agenda we have in front of us. So with that, I'm going to go ahead to that moment we all look forward to, taking the role of our task force members. So as before, please respond when I call your name, and remember to unmute your phone or speaker on your computer. So with that in mind, we'll begin, as we have in the past. At the top of the list with Advent Health, Dr. Scott Brady.
Hi, this is Vincent Hsu covering for Scott Brady, who is unable to be here today.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Hsu. We appreciate having you back.
Thank you.
Alpha in, Jesse Martinez.
Good morning, George. Present.
Good morning. Black Business Investment Fund, Inez Long.
Good morning. Yes.
Career Source Central Florida, Pamela Neighbors. You want to please put your phone or computer on mute until your name is called, please. All right, Central Florida Auto Dealers Association, Evelyn Cardenas.
Present.
Church Street Entertainment, Doug Taylor.
Good morning, Mr. Chair. Present.
Thank you. City of Orlando and Orlando Venues, Alan Johnson.
Good morning, George. Present.
Good morning. Curly and Penn, Dan Ward.
Good morning, George.
Good morning. Garden Restaurants, Dave George.
Good morning, Present.
Don Julio's Mexican Kitchen, Florencio Larry Rodriguez. Larry Rodriguez.
Good morning.
Larry, you there? There you are. Thank you. Dr. Phillips Center for the Performing Arts, Kathy Ransberg.
Good morning, George.
Morning. Florida Department of Health in Orange County, Dr. Raul Pina. Dr. Pino. I know you'll be with us later today in the agenda as well. Florida Restaurant and Lodging Association, Carrie Burns.
Good afternoon, present.
Thank you. Highwoods Properties, Steve Garrity. Steve Garrity. Okay. High Regency, Brian Combs.
Good morning, George.
Good morning. J. Henry's Barbershop, John Henry. John Henry.
Mr. Henry couldn't make it this morning.
Thank you. John Michael, Exquisite Weddings and Catering, Michael Thomas. Michael Thomas. Johnny Rivers, Grill and Market, Johnny Rivers. Johnny, I think, Johnny Rivers with us? Okay. Kissimmee, Osceola County Chamber of Commerce, John Newstreet.
Present. Good morning.
Good morning. Lake County Agency for Economic Prosperity, Brandon Matulka.
Present.
Sea Spa and Nail Spa, Mary Chow.
Good morning, present.
Good morning. Mosaic Hair Studio, Mike Van de Abiel.
Good morning, President.
National Entrepreneur Center, Jerry Ross.
Good morning, George. Present.
Good morning, Jerry. Nelson Mullins, Broad and Cassell, Wayne Rich.
Good morning, George.
Good morning.
Present.
Orange County Public Schools, Dr. Barbara Jenkins. Dr. Jenkins. Orlando City Soccer Club, Alex Lateo.
Good morning, everyone. Present.
Good morning, Alex. Orlando Health, Dr. George Rawls.
Present.
Orlando International Airport, Phil Brown.
Good morning, George. Present.
All right, thank you, Phil. Orlando Magic, Alex Martins.
Good morning, George.
Good morning, Alex. Orlando Shakespeare Theater, Douglas Love Ramos.
Morning, George.
Good morning. Prospera, Agosto Sanabria.
Present.
Rejoice in the Lord Ministries and African American Council of Christian Clergy, Pastor Roderick Zach.
Morning, President.
Morning. Rosen Shingle Creek, Dan Giordano.
Good morning, George. President.
SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment, Brad Gilmore.
Good morning, George.
Seminole County Government, Tricia Johnson. Tricia Johnson. The Mall at Millennia, Stephen Jameson.
Morning, George.
Morning, Steve. The Trantham Santiago Group, Conrad Santiago. Conrad Santiago. Okay. The Vineyard Wine Bar and Healthy Bistro, Deborah Linden.
Good morning, present.
Truist, Sandy Hostetter. Sandy Hostetter. UCF, Rosen College of Hospitality Management, Dr. Yifeng Wong.
Good morning, present.
Good morning. Unicorn National Development, Chuck Weddle.
Good morning, I'm here.
United States Security, Chris Earl.
Good morning, George.
If others could please put yourself on mute unless your name is being called, please. Universal Orlando, Rich Costales. Rich Costales.
Good morning, present.
Good morning, Rich. VND Ventures, Harold Mills.
Good morning, George. I'm present.
Walmart Incorporated, Monisha Brown.
Good morning, everyone. Present.
Again, if your name has not been called, please remain reach your phone or speaker, computer speaker, please. Walt Disney World Resort, Thomas Matzlam.
Good morning, present.
Good morning, Thomas. Wawa Incorporated, Todd Souders.
Good morning, present.
Wyndham Destinations, Frank Decco.
Good morning, George. Present.
Frank. And last, YMCA of Central Florida, Dan Wilcox.
Good morning, George.
Morning. Very well. With that, I'm now going to, with the roll call complete, I'm now going to turn over the agenda, next item to Tim Julian. Tim?
Thanks, George. We're going to move to approval of the minutes from the May 21st meeting of the full task force. At this time, I want to call on any members of the task force for any changes to the minutes? Okay, at this time, can I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
Doug Taylor, motion for approval.
Chuck Woodall,
Thanks, Doug.
second.
Chuck, thanks for the second. All those in favor, please unmute and say aye.
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 Thank you. At this time, any opposed, please unmute and say aye. Hearing none, please show the minutes approved. Turn it back over to George for public comment.
All right, as always, we want to be sure to comment and share that in an effort to comply with CDC social distancing guidelines and for the safety of residents and task force members, the Economic Recovery Task Force will conduct meeting virtually. Orange County remains committed to providing an alternative platform for residents to have the opportunity to submit their public comment. I will ask the Orange County staff to read the public comments we received online and add it to the public record. Please note public comments received that do not include the required information will not be read. Comments that extend beyond the set time limit will not be read in their entirety. However, the resident's entire comment will be entered into the public record. Please note that the time allocated to each individual for public comment via online submission may be reduced from the normal 3 minutes based on the number of speakers. So Lucas, do we have any public comments for today's meeting?
Yes, sir. We have 5 public comments for today's meeting. We will begin them now. Our first public comment comes from Ms. Patricia Parrott, address 1759, Lady Slipper Circle, Orlando, Florida 32825. Economic Recovery Task Force and public comment. Where are the warning signs of every business entrance for polypropylene and other chemicals in use and MSDS sheets for every chemical at the door? MSDS sheets are OSHA regulations. My tongue swelled for 3 days after entering Waterford Target after no warning signs of the polypropylene. People stating eye irritation, redness, itching, entering Florida Mall. No mall number to call to ask chemicals in use, and individual stores do not have information. Clinics writing, seeing high numbers of patients with mask irritation. Mr. Pino, actually it's Dr. Pino, not advising food dye allergies can cross-react to polypropylene in the mask and air. Pregnant people not given MSDS sheets showing any formaldehyde or chemicals in the mask that can affect their embryos and fetuses. Lawyers will be advertising, can your small business survive a lawsuit? Federal DOJ ADA investigations from improper procedures with employees and customers asking their medical condition. Taking temperatures with no medical certification to advise on high temperatures. People forced to stand in 100-degree heat outside with a mask and employees getting temperatures of 102 and 104. Customers wrongly ignored, told to drive home when this could be true core body temperature and they need medical care. Research proves just 10 minutes in the heat with mask alters the thermal regulation and can lead to hypothermia. At moderate work rates, 50 to 70% maximum oxygen uptake or maximum exercise capacity, respirators impede the loss of heat from the face and can result in hypothermia occurring sooner than it otherwise would. There is also an effect of heat in the ability to recognize dangers, make coordinated movements, and perform manual tasks. As deep body temperature increases, dexterity, cognition, and motor skills degrade significantly. One of the most dangerous effects of overheating is disorientation and not being able to recognize the direction to safety in the event of extreme danger. This inability to recognize safe passage has contributed to past deaths. Our second public comment comes from Isabel Sam, 4818, native dancer Lane, Orlando, Florida, 32826. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I would like to tell you a brief story of my family's history that ties into the story of the United States. My mother's family lived in Spain during the Spanish Inquisition, and they were Jewish. The family that survived were the ones that decided to ignore the social conditioning, changed their names, hung a pig on their front porch, and took the first boat to South Africa. The ones who went along with the social conditioning were murdered. In South America, socialism started taking over, and my grandparents chose to ignore the social conditioning and left their children become citizens of this great country. On my father's side, I have family members who chose to ignore the conditioning from King George and fought in the Revolutionary War during the middle of a smallpox pandemic. Today, we have all kinds of draconian conditioning that's trying so hard to get through this hysteria over a virus that is so tiny that mask manufacturers are putting warnings on the boxes the masks are sold in, telling the public that the mask cannot prevent you from catching this virus. We have doctors out of California reporting that they've seen a year's worth of suicide attempts in 4 weeks because of these shutdowns. We have economists warning that we're marching into something much worse than the Great Depression unless we get back to work and life. The United States and Orlando were formed by brave people who chose to question tyrannical laws. I would like to encourage you all today to be brave like our ancestors and completely reopen Orlando and Orange County. Thank you, Isabel. Our third public comment comes from Matt Colis-Bari, owner Kings Point Box LLC, 7075 Kings Point Parkway, Orlando, Florida, 32819. Good afternoon. My name is Matt. I own a small gym in Orange County. We have been seriously impacted by the shutdown. I heard that Orange County may be offering $10,000 grants to small businesses. That help is greatly needed. I was wondering how I could go about applying. Any information would be greatly appreciated. Thank you in advance for your time and consideration. And we'll refer this specific comment to staff for follow-up. Our fourth public comment comes from Dennis Freites. His address is 9453 Westover Club Circle, Windermere, Florida, 34786. And we will need a timer on this one as well. COVID-19 testimony comments. Hi. First, thanks for the great things you're doing for our beloved Orange County. We need to reopen our economy with proper precautions now. Based on the coronavirus infectious pandemic situation, empirical, scientific, and other facts, the logical and the best thing to do in order to prevent and minimize death is for the government, federal, state, county, and city to mandate until there is a vaccine to follow all CDC, U.S. Center for Disease Control guidance. To follow CDC guidance, government rules that should include wear PPE and make it mandatory. As a business, a non-government organization, and others should plan and prepare for reopening based on established guidelines. Provide PPE like free masks, visors to patrons who don't have one. Use plexiglass and take other precautions as appropriate. Don't let anyone that doesn't have PPE mask inside a building because you endanger employees and others alike. People's freedom should be limited in an emergency, like pandemic or epidemic situations, because persons or employees with no PPE can cause death or risk to themselves and others. The time is now to reopen our economy with proper precautions in place like the below. Protection, checklist, stay safe, stay positive. The checklist is as follows. Keep informed with empirical CDC facts and not false conspiracy theories. Have situational awareness, know your surroundings, a survival plan. Stay at home if sick, except when going to a medical facility to get treated. Don't spread bad germs to others. Must wear when going out to stores, other gathering places, or traveling, planes, buses, trains, ships, at least until you're vaccinated against the COVID-19. N95 or N99 face mask or alternative homemade mask with FM2.5 5-layer filter. Next section is practice. Physical distancing, don't touch face, no handshakes, use hand sanitizer, wash hands frequently, call before going to see a doctor or a dentist, use virtual telehealth care, be careful on elevators near other individuals and groups, and sneezing or coughing, cover your face, don't sneeze onto others, don't be a germ terrorist. Stay in place, don't go out unless an emergency, or you are sick, until cleared to do so. Avoid group congregation, use technology, Zoom, WhatsApp, Skype, Messenger, email to communicate and participate in virtual family and other gatherings, funerals, events, and meetings. And the time limit has expired on this specific public comment, but we will ensure that it is in its entirety read into the record. Our last public comment comes from Mark McHugh from Gatorland, 14501 South Orange Blossom Trail, Orlando, Florida, 32837. His topic, thank you. Thank you to Mayor Demings, the members of the Economic Recovery Task Force, Bringing Tourism Back Working Group, and Orange County government staff for your dedicated support of Central Florida's tourism industry. Your thoughtful and phased approach to opening businesses has provided a detailed, clear, and most importantly, safe roadmap for economic recovery of our industry and the region. I am confident we will continue to open significant segments of our tourism business assets in a timely and safe manner. You have dedicated countless hours of your personal time to secure this pathway to recovery. And on behalf of the 190 team members that depend on Gatorland for health and security of their families, we sincerely thank you. Signed, Mark McHugh, President and CEO of Gatorland. And that, sir, concludes our public comment for today.
Great, thank you, Lucas, and appreciate those who contributed those comments very much. So now we're at the stage that's always important to our agenda, and that's getting a health update. As before, we will lead off with Dr. Raul Pino from the Florida Department of Health in Orange County. He'll be followed by Dr. Vincent Hsu from Advent Health, and then we'll move to Dr. George Rawls from Orlando Health. With that, let me go ahead and turn it now over to Dr. Pino. Dr. Pino, you're recognized.
Thank you. Good morning, George and colleagues. I would like to share with you some of the data that we have recently collected. What you are seeing right now is the total number of cases and death and hospitalization for Florida. And also you can see the South Florida, West Palm, Coral Spring, and Miami. Miami, they are very active with respect to the state in general. For testing, we have, as of this morning, 1,849 cases that are accumulative testing, and we have tested over 66,000 people in our county. Our accumulative positivity rate is about 2.8. It continues to decrease. And also, you can see on your right some of the metrics. In county by county testing, I would like to call your attention to the graph in yellow below. Those are new cases by day. And those are by the day that are reported to us. As you can see, it goes up and down, up and down, up and down. And that means it's stable, the pandemic. It still has not been fully controlled. And it goes up and down. And that's what we have to be careful with, is those up that ended up in a large outbreak. We are following, we know that that we are going to see right now as we put a lead into the wide community distribution. What we are going to see are some outbreaks, and we are following a few around the county, but there is no one that is out of control. We have managed to stabilize some of those areas where we have high incidence. So this is the metrics that we are following. The number of ER visits for flu-like or influenza-like is stable, as well as the number of EDBC for COVID has continued to decline. Where you see an increase in yellow is in the number of new cases, but it's just, this data can be misleading because that's just the total number, not with relationship to the number of tests that has been performed. And then in red, you have the positivity rate, which continue to be low. I will also like to show you, let me see if I can take this out right now here. Always have issue with this part here about sharing. I would like to share with you a density map that we have done with by zip code and rate. And rate takes in consideration the population size in each of those. Let me bring it active. Here it is. Let's see if it shows. Okay, here's the map. This is our county, and this is just fresh, up to May 25th. From the 12th to the 25th, we are selecting, we are have a moving target now for every 2 weeks. And you have the rate per 10,000 resident in each of the zip codes in the county. You can see that the highest activity right now is in 32703 and 32824. In those areas, we have 2 outbreaks that we are following, and it could be the reason why we have seen this increased activity in those 2 areas as those tests are assigned to those 2 areas. We will be starting calling the attention to employers and others on break rooms. We have a few cases that we have been able to track to break rooms in the workspace where people congregate and don't think to the hygiene to be as efficient as it's being in general areas for the general public. So that's an area that we are going to concentrate our efforts as we continue to educate the public and employers on what best practices we should be putting in place. That is my update.
Thank you, Dr. Pino. Do we have any questions, Dr. Pino, on his update?
Chuck Whittle, I have a question for you, Dr. Pino. Good morning. How are you?
Good morning, Chuck.
Dr. Pino, despite opening all the businesses, it seems like from what you just showed us, the data is showing that we're continuing to go down in cases. Even though we have more documented cases, that's because of more testing, but the percentage of cases is actually declining. Is that correct?
The percentage of positivity rate is low, yes.
And do we meet that 15-day trend yet that is starting to point us in the direction of phase 2?
That's a moving target in the sense that, 14 days is will move as we move in time. So it depends on the time that you measure. Now, let me see if I can bring this graph here. It's a PowerPoint. Let me bring it quick. There is, let me see how can I phrase this one. There is, when you compare last 7 days to the prior 7 days, there is a slight increase in the positivity rate, but it's minimum. It will come up. It's a PowerPoint. As soon as it comes up, I will share it. But the last week, the number of cases is higher than the prior week. Now, we also doing more testing, and the positivity rate has increased slightly when you compare week to week, but not significantly enough that we are concerned. We prepared this document for the court because the court have to present it to the district for, let me see if I can share it, came up, share it here. And let's see where that PowerPoint is here. Let me share it with you as soon as it come up. So it's slow. Can you see this graph now?
The title of it, not the graph yet.
Oh, it's...
So Dr. Pino, as we're waiting for that to populate, we have not seen the spike, though, that we were concerned with. I mean, we were concerned with the risk.
We have not seen a spike. So the prior week, the average positivity rate was 1.9. The week prior to the prior week, it was 1.7. So a slight increase, not what I will call a significant increase.
And what about hospitalizations?
No, those continue to decrease.
So we're doing pretty good.
We'll be able to hear more from Dr. Shu and Dr. Ross on the hospitalization status. Dr. Pino, what we're seeing right now is just a title data for Ninth Judicial Circuit Court. We haven't seen the graph that you were describing yet.
Oh, okay. Let me see.
Oh, here we go. It's coming up now. There we go.
Sorry.
Thank you.
So so there you have. Those are comparing the 14 days, the last 14 days, and those are the numbers.
Dr. Pino, unfortunately, it went back to just your name. If you can go back to where you were a little moment ago, it did go up and went back.
Let me do it again.
Thank you.
Can you see it now?
It's there now. Thank you.
Okay, don't touch anything. So those are the last 2 weeks, and highlighted in yellow, you have the positivity rate, and below the dates, and those are the negative tests on top of the bars, and below in the bottom part of the bar, you have the number of positive cases for that day. So there is a slight increase last week when you take into consideration to the prior week. But I will not call that significant at all.
And that considers some increased activity in the community, certainly over the last several days or more, right?
Yes, we are about to be in our 4th week of increased activity, and there is no significant changes, really.
It's very encouraging.
That's a helpful graph. Thank you. Any other questions of Dr. Pino? Okay, well, Dr. Pino, thank you very much. We're going to go ahead and move on and I'll recognize Dr. Vincent Shu from Advent Health. If you can give us your update.
Yeah, good morning. I'm going to share my screen if you can see that, I hope. Still trying to, don't know what you can see.
Takes a little while. There we go. It's popping up.
Okay, well, you're supposed to be seeing a dashboard census of our cases. And what we're seeing here is really from March 10 all the way to the present day. And this represents our hospitals in Central Florida Division South. Orlando is really the one that takes in the most cases, so it's largely a proxy for Orlando. There's a few other hospitals. There's Seminole and Kissimmee and Celebration, which are in other counties, but 4 of these hospitals are in our division, are in Orange County. And you can see that from a high of 100 in the middle of April, we've really come down nicely. And we're here at pretty much the lowest level we've seen since the decline. We're at 26 positive now, and I believe 18 or 19 of those are at Orlando specifically. So, that is really a positive trend. We do recognize that the trends in inpatient census lags behind that of the community. So as the community starts increasing, we won't see an increase in the census probably until several days later, because by the time they present for care and get admitted, several days has elapsed. But overall, again, we're seeing very positive trends. And on the outpatient side, our testing percent positivity mirrors what Dr. Pino had said. We're somewhere on the order of 1% or so positivity based on the most recent data. I don't have that right in front of me, but overall, on the healthcare side of it, the trends are looking very positive. It's just now a matter of seeing what's going to happen in the next few weeks moving ahead as we reopen. And that's all I have.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Shu. Any questions of Dr. Shu at this time from members of the task force? All right, hearing none. Thank you, Dr. Shu. We'll turn it over to Dr. Rawls.
Good morning, everyone. So we continue to see low numbers. Our numbers did creep up over the weekend. We were at a lowest point of 5 patients in the hospital that are COVID positive for a few days before we hit the weekend. And that slowly clicked up to about 19 right now. So tracking that very, very carefully. It's, as Dr. Shu just mentioned, that really has nothing to do with this weekend per se. That would reflect some activity in the patients that we're seeing that would have probably been a look back to a week or more. Numbers are still low, though, and if you look at the trend overall is still moving in the way that we would hope. So we'll track that continually every day. Our testing capacity is still very, very robust. We're testing thousands of patients every week. Many of those are being tested for procedural clearance, so they're going to come to the hospital, they're going to get a procedure. Everybody who comes in gets a test. Still continuing all of our enhanced screening as well. But again, overall, as we're seeing it, that we're looking at reassuring numbers with the caveat that we are tracking a slow climb up in our numbers over this weekend.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Rawls. Any questions of Dr. Rawls from the task force members?
I have a question for all the doctors. There was a lot of talk about second wave. Is that something that's still expected? Is that further down the road? Are we headed in that direction? I haven't heard much more about that.
Who'd care to respond to that question of our medical experts?
Well, I'll go ahead and start. This is Vince. We haven't seen a second wave as of yet, and I think it's really difficult, obviously, to predict if and when it's going to come. There have been some experts have talked about a seasonal wave, a winter wave. We do know that in past pandemics, pretty much every pandemic that has occurred has had some sort of second wave. Just don't know what form or fashion. And so I think the prudent thing would be to prepare for one that it may come. Again, we don't know when or how severe it's going to be, but I think remaining prepared is really the important thing that we have to do as we move forward.
Any other one of our medical experts care to comment on that at this time on that question?
Well, I do agree with Dr. Shu. This is Dr. Raupino. We could say that we are slowly going in that direction, but very slowly. The question is not if we are going to have more cases or not. We are going to have more cases as social activity increase. We should not expect that a number of cases is going to dramatically continue to decrease when we increase social activity. I think the dilemma and where our ability is going to be is how that increase happens. Because if that increase happens in a controlled environment where we can follow and do trace investigation and we do not overwhelm the healthcare system, then we will continue in good shape. Is how can we handle it? And how big is going to be the second wave? That's another big question. I don't expect it to be like we have in April, early April, if we continue to observe social distancing, but it will be safe to assume that it would be at least 50% of the number of cases that we had when we were at our highest. But again, all depends on how we behave, how the public reacts, and how we keep the measures that are in place.
Thank you, Dr. Pino. Any other questions? Please. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you, Lucas and Chair. A question for the medical professionals. Is there any comparison to the seasonal flu? For instance, does the seasonal flu, the regular flu, non-COVID-19 flu typically taper off this time of year? Just curious if there's any comparisons on that.
There have been some studies that I have reviewed that does indicate that other coronaviruses, the non-COVID 19 coronaviruses do exhibit some sort of seasonality. In fact, we know that they do. Whether or not it behaves exactly as flu, again, is yet to be determined. And this is a coronavirus that's a little bit different than the usual coronaviruses that have been circulating that cause very mild illness. So while, again, I think Dr. Pino's comments are spot on. I mean, the human behavior is going to be a big issue. Whether or not the seasonality is going to exhibit a significant, increase in winter like flu is just, I would not be confident in predicting that. But again, I think it's all about good preparation for that.
Great, thank you, Dr. Street.
I have a question.
Please, go ahead.
Inside dining versus patio dining outside, is there any chance of having more invasive situation with inside dining versus outside patio dining in restaurants?
Let's see. I think the question was, is there procedures that might look different more aggressively if it's indoor dining than outdoor dining?
Yes.
That you're asking our medical experts if they would suggest that was a prudent idea, or that if, or the way it might be conducted may be sufficient. I don't. Any of our medical experts.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear my colleagues' opinions as well. But I mean, in general, outdoor dining is generally considered to be, in terms of, it tends to be safer in terms of reducing the risk of spread of disease compared to indoors, and it's largely due to the dynamics of airflow, the fact that outside, there's sunlight and just much greater dilution that occurs because of the large amount of air that's circulating. Indoors is much more of a risk for transmission, again, due to the number of people within a given airspace and the less circulation that occurs and the less dilution of particles that occur. I'll be happy to let Dr. Pino or Rawls expound further if they would like.
No, you are spot on. Yeah, that's a reality. Outside dining seems to be safer, and it may have to do with the number of particles per square centimeter in the air, but it is safer, yes.
Okay, very well, thank you. Any last questions for our medical experts before we move on? All right, here.
George, just one.
I'm sorry.
George, just one point of order. Sorry to interrupt, but Jay Henry has joined us, and wanted to recognize him for the minute. He's here with us in the coordination center.
Excellent, very well. Good to have him present. Okay, thank you, everybody, and thank you to our medical experts. This is such an important part of our agenda as we continue to track this in our methodical and efficient process that we've been conducting now since the beginning of this recovery process. So with that, it's my pleasure to turn over now to Tim Giuliani for our next set of presentations. Tim?
Yes, thanks, George. We're actually going to hear a number of presentations now, all related to the reopening of theme parks. And the first presentation that we're going to hear is from SeaWorld, which will be followed by Walt Disney World. And then we'll hear from the Director of Orange County Planning, Environmental and Development Services Department. And then we will open up for questions from the members of the task force. So the first presentation, we're going to hear from Mark Swanson, Interim CEO of SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment, Kyle Miller, President of SeaWorld Orlando, and Brad Gilmore, Vice President of Operations for Discovery Cove. I want to welcome you all and recognize you for your presentation.
Well, thank you. It's good to be here. This is Mark Swanson. I'm the interim CEO of SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment, as I mentioned. And you might know our company as the parks here in Orlando with SeaWorld, Discovery Cove, and Aquatica. And we also have Busch Gardens down in Tampa and in Virginia. And we have other SeaWorld parks in Texas and San Diego. We also have the Sesame Place brand up in Pennsylvania and a handful of other parks, 12 parks across 5 states. We're here today to just talk about the Orlando parks And with me is Kyle Miller, who runs our Orlando parks, the 3 parks here, SeaWorld, Discovery Cove, and Aquatica. And then Brad Gilmore, who's on the task force, who's one of our operations leaders here in Orlando as well. I just want to start out by saying thank you to the committee, to Mayor Demings, to everyone for allowing us the opportunity to be here today and to present our plans for getting the parks open. This is certainly an exciting time for all of us. We had a really good visit yesterday with the public health officials here in Orlando, and they were able to kind of see firsthand some of the things I'm going to talk about today. We'll go through our different protocols. We'll talk about different things we're going to be doing. I'll be a little more summarized, but they did see everything firsthand yesterday, and it was a really collaborative and good visit with everyone. Before we get to the actual presentation, though, I want to talk a little bit about the dates. So we are targeting to open our parks on June 10th for an employee appreciation night, and then we would open to the public on June 11th. So we can go forward to the next slide and just talk a little bit about all the things we're going to be doing to enhance our park operations at reopening. Certainly, as I mentioned, we have a long history here in Orlando. SeaWorld opened in the early 1970s, so we've been operating our parks for over 45 years here, our SeaWorld park for over 45 years here in Orlando. And we've always had safety as a top priority, obviously. And that still holds true today. What we'll talk about here is just some enhanced safety measures that we're going to take to provide an even more safe environment and some of the specific protocols to deal with the COVID-19 pandemic. So these enhancements are going to be communicated very comprehensively. So the overall park enhancements really have to do with face coverings, physical distancing, cleaning and sanitation, temperature screening, our work and sick policies, and then enhanced COVID-19 training. And then we'll have enhancements, like I said, to key operational areas, mainly around guest arrival and ticketing, our restaurants, our retail shops, our animal exhibits and interactions, and in our public spaces like our venues, our rides and attractions, our parades and character meet and greets, and our employee facilities, and in our water park facilities. And really, as I mentioned, health and well-being has always been a top priority of ours. We're very confident as longtime operators of parks in our ability to execute on this plan. And we'll manage the capacity accordingly so that we can always have safety as a forefront of what we want to do. So if we go forward to the next slide, provide a little more detail on some of the overall park enhancements. So specifically with face coverings, we will require face coverings for our employees and our guests. And for those guests who don't have a face covering, we'll provide one for them. And we'll have ample signage throughout the park reminding them everyone of the importance of the face coverings. Our second area of focus will be on physical distancing. So we will have, through the use of signage and markings, create physical distancing throughout the park. And this will be very clearly outlined. We'll also have contactless payment systems in place, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And we'll have plexiglass utilized in a number of areas too, where we need to create a little bit of a separation between our employees and guests. The third area is cleaning and sanitation. Certainly as longtime operators, our parks have always been clean, and we'll just be that much more rigorous about the cleaning process. So you'll see increased cleaning and sanitation. You'll see a lot of increased hand sanitation stations throughout the park. Our fourth area is temperature screening. So we will require that our guests and our employees all pass a temperature screening before they will be allowed into the park. As far as the fifth area, our work and sick policies, we will encourage our employees who aren't feeling well, who are sick, obviously not come to work, or if they start to not feel well at work, we would ask them to go home. So we'll reinforce that training around that. And that really leads me to the sixth key point here is the training. We'll have enhanced training for all of our ambassadors around the COVID-19 protocols that we have put in place. So moving forward to some specific enhancements to key operational areas, really starting with guest arrivals and ticketing. There'll be a lot of signage as you drive into the park. Eventually, as you make your way towards the ticketing area and ultimately the turnstiles, our turnstiles, you'll be able to walk up with your season pass or your ticket and actually have it scanned by an attendant who will be behind plexiglass. We can scan right through the plexiglass to your ticket, and you'll be allowed access into the park. There will be no need for any sort of finger scanning or anything like that. So it would be a very contactless entry process into the park. Within our restaurants, we will have layout. We'll create physical distancing in our restaurants. We will modify some of our service delivery as well to be more prepackaged and items that we give to you, as opposed to a guest taking an item or a buffet or anything like that. And we'll, again, as I mentioned, we'll have the ability to, when you're ready to check out, provide like a Google Pay or an Apple Pay, and you'll be able to very quickly, without any sort of contact, check out from the restaurant. We'll have a similar setup in our retail shops. There we'll actually have dedicated entryways into our stores and then dedicated exits as well. And within the store, we'll have distance markers and create distancing within the shops. And again, if you purchase something, when you do, you'll be able to go up to the register. The employee will be able to scan the purchase through the plexiglass, and you'll be able to check out. And we will actually provide your own bag or wrapping, whatever you would like to take your gift or souvenir home. So again, you're the one doing the majority of the touching there. In our animal exhibits and interactions, everyone certainly enjoys getting to see the great collection of animals we have here in Orlando parks. And we will create social distancing in those viewing areas. We'll have that clearly marked. We'll especially pay close attention to sanitizing those handrails and things like that people lean up against to view our animals. And we'll have some other modifications and changes as are outlined here on the slide. So going forward to the next slide, within our public spaces, so throughout the park and then in our show and presentation venues, we will have enhanced cleaning in our show venues and presentation venues. We'll create staggered seating so that people can have the appropriate distancing. And then after those shows or presentations, we will have enhanced cleaning processes in those areas as well. For our rides and attractions, it'll be very, very similar. Social distancing or physical distancing in the queues. We will actually have hand sanitizer as you get on the ride, hand sanitizer as you get off the ride. So we're going to try to make that as clean as possible. And we'll have enhanced cleaning throughout the day on a number of our rides and attractions. At our parades and meet and greets, certainly here in Orlando, we have the Sesame Street area, which is really popular with children and great characters to get your photo with. We will still be able to do some of that, but we'll do it at a safe distance with physical distancing so that everyone is safe, but can still have a fun day and see their favorite characters. In our employee facilities, we will treat them much the same as we're treating the rest of the park. They will be cleaned, sanitized. We'll have signage throughout, reminding our employees of all the new protocols we have in place and making sure that they are as safe as can be. On the next slide, just to talk a little bit about our water park attractions and related facilities. So our parks like Aquatica and Discovery Cove, we certainly take water quality very seriously, and we treat our water appropriately. And as we know here on the slide, according to the CDC, there is no evidence that COVID-19 can spread to people through the use of water in pools. But we nonetheless will increase the cleaning and sanitation at high contact surfaces, including rides and rafts and tubes and life vests. We'll also limit capacity and create physical distancing in these locations as well. An example would also be we'll spread lounge chairs so people can still have a great experience, but it'll be spaced appropriately. If you've ever been to our Discovery Cove Park, you know that park lends itself nicely to being able to kind of space out nicely and have some privacy and some great time as a family or with friends or whatever it may be. So the next few slides here are just some examples of the signage you're going to see throughout the park. As on our tour yesterday, folks got to see a number of these examples. I think these are good reminders. You'll see on here some of the directional signage, some of the entrance signs, the exit signs, the reminders about face coverings and wash your hands, that type of thing. So we'll have this signage up throughout our park, and then obviously enhanced training with our employees as well to ensure guests are aware of everything, all these new protocols. And I'll just wrap up by saying, obviously these are adaptive protocols and guidelines. We'll continue to stay close to the task force and our community health leaders and the CDC and others. And as things evolve or procedures change, protocols become revised or improved, we'll certainly adapt accordingly. So with that, I just want to say thank you on behalf of myself, Kyle, and Brad. We're really excited to be here today. We're excited to bring back our guests. We're excited to bring back our employees. And we want to get these 3 parks open. And so we thank you again for the opportunity to be here, and we'll stop and see if anyone has any questions.
Yes, thank you, Mark. Much appreciated. And we are actually going to move straight into the second presentation, and we'll save questions for the end. So at this time, I want to recognize Walt Disney World, and presenting on their behalf is Jim McPhee, Senior Vice President of Operations. Jim, you're recognized.
Thank you, Tim, and good morning, everyone. It's an honor to be with you all today. I'd be remiss not to start off with a very sincere thank you to all of you for your leadership of our Central Florida community throughout these challenging months. Yesterday morning, we had the opportunity to meet with Mayor Demings and his staff to preview our proposed reopening plans for our theme parks at the Walt Disney World Resort. And we're here to share all of that and our protocols with you this morning. I'll take you through our reopening schedule for the ramp up of our theme parks, our approach to the implementation of our health and safety protocols, and the foundation of these efforts, which are established through our focus on education, communication, and engagement. Let me start off with our opening dates. Our plans call for a phased reopening of our theme parks, beginning with the Magic Kingdom and Disney's Animal Kingdom on Saturday, July 11th. Epcot and Disney's Hollywood Studios will open on Wednesday, July 15th. We believe our reopening proposal for our property reflects a very thoughtful, methodical, and phased approach, and we've incorporated all of the reopening protocols throughout our guest experience and our cast experience. We will deploy a series of soft opening tactics for select audiences several days prior to our July 11th with cast previews and affinity soft opening preview days. This will reflect a thoughtful ramp up in our attendance strategy and allow us to launch, learn, and adjust along the way. We've also established significant limits on our overall attendance for each park and the locations within, along with many enhancements to our safety protocols. We will be also managing our overall attendance demand through a new theme park reservation system. It will require our guests to obtain a reservation for park entry in advance. We'll share more details about this component in the near future. All right, I'd like to now take you through our approach to our health and safety protocols. Our overarching objective is to establish and implement enhanced safety protocols for a responsible reopening of our theme parks. We're focused on 5 distinct safety protocols that together will help us achieve this objective. I'll introduce these at a high level, and we will go a bit deeper on the subsequent page. Start on the left, enhanced protective measures. We are implementing increased measures to help reduce the spread of the virus through a layered approach. Examples of these measures include required face coverings for all guests and our cast members, more frequent hand washing stations and hand sanitizer stations, and barriers to facilitate physical distancing. Each of these measures, when aligned and put together, will enhance the safety of our property. From a physical distancing perspective, we are implementing significant reductions in overall capacity, enabling physical distancing throughout the parks. Also, within attractions, retail, and food and beverage locations, we will reduce capacity and implement practices to increase physical distancing. All of these steps will be facilitated by our incredible cast and various physical signage throughout the property, communicating the need for this enhanced physical distancing. From a cleaning and sanitation perspective, building on our existing standards of cleaning, we will implement more frequent cleaning protocols, both on stage for our guests and in our backstage areas for our cast members. From a temperature and health screening perspective, for our guests, we will conduct temperature screening similar to how it has been implemented at Disney Springs. And for our cast, in addition to at-home temperature checks and health assessments, we will also conduct temperature checks on site. Limited contact enhancements is another critical area of focus for us, and we are reviewing cast and guest interactions that have, in the past, required close proximity. We're also reviewing experiences that result in guests or cast touching the same surfaces repeatedly. We're working to reduce the number of such interactions and experiences to minimize contact points. Examples of these enhancements include increased mobile food ordering options, encouraging cashless transactions, and temporarily pausing character meet and greet and play areas. Key elements that support all of these efforts will be our strong focus on education, communication, and engagement, both with our guests and our cast members. We will train our cast to operate in this new environment and familiarize our on each of the tactics that we'll be deploying. I won't cover every bullet point here, but I'll share additional key themes within each, starting with enhanced protective measures. As I mentioned, guest and cast members will be required to wear face coverings. We are deploying increased numerous hand washing and sanitation stations for guests and cast members on stage and backstage, with visual reminders emphasizing frequency and importance. We're also increasing our use of plexiglass barriers at points of sales in retail and food and beverage areas where appropriate distancing cannot be maintained. Physical distancing, we're applying appropriate physical distancing requirements and reminding cast and guests to maintain those distance. I made mention earlier to the fact that in managing our theme park demand, we will implement a pre-arrival theme park reservation system. We will significantly reduce the overall capacity of our parks and the facilities within. This includes reducing capacity on attractions and restaurants and retail stores and on our various modes of transportation, which plays a very important role in connecting our experiences together. We will temporarily suspend parades, fireworks, and other events that create crowds. For our cast, we're making changes in the environment of our back of house areas and break rooms, and we have modifications to our facilities to enable physical distancing, whether on lunch or break or traveling to and from various work locations. As I mentioned, with cleaning and sanitation, we have a multi-tiered approach to enhance our cleaning and sanitation with frequent increased cleaning across high-touch, high-location surface areas, on stage and backstage. Again, temperature screening for our guests will be performed at the main entrance arrival points of our theme parks for arriving guests. For our cast members, in addition to at-home temperature checks and health assessments, we will conduct on-site temperature checks as well. Again, on limited contact enhancements, we're also very focused on limiting the number of contacts our guests and cast members must have in the parks. In addition to further leveraging our magic bands for contactless payment, we'll expand our focus on other contactless payment systems. We'll also enable and encourage a cashless environment and significantly expand our existing mobile order platform in our restaurants. We are closing several of our higher touch experiences, again, including character meet and greets high-touch areas such as playgrounds and water effects that may draw gatherings that may compromise physical distancing. Our key focus here as it relates to health and safety protocols is around education, communication, and engagement. We believe a critical aspect of all of these new protocols is the development of strategies and tactics that are focused on education, communication, and engagement. Relating to education, we are developing a series of know before you go communication vehicles, and our objective is to reinforce our health and safety messages to guests before they arrive on our property, so they are aware and prepared for the new environment. Whether through the initial booking of their vacation on our website, through follow-up communication throughout their journey here, or through the My Disney Experience mobile app, we want to make this important information available to guests before they arrive. Communication throughout is a continual thread that will pull through every aspect of our vacation experience. Ongoing communication is critical, and we'll reinforce this messaging throughout. When our guests arrive, they'll be reminded of our safety protocols as they enter our property and at various key points in our parks to reinforce these messages. These protocols will be present and visible throughout our onstage and backstage areas. Engagement is key, and our cast members have always played a key role in the guest experience, and this will be no different when we reopen. We want our cast members to be focused on their own well-being and that of our guests. In particular, our cast members will be trained to positively encourage guests to practice the correct behaviors and demonstrate them themselves. In addition to those performing existing roles throughout the experience, we're developing a social distance squad, a dedicated team of highly energetic and informative cast members who are committed to engaging and inspiring our guests to follow the appropriate guidelines. These social distancing squad cast members were introduced with the opening of Disney Springs and have been a huge hit for our guests and very effective in emphasizing the importance of these elements. We'll deploy dedicated teams in each of our theme parks overall. I'll walk you through just a couple visuals on the types of signage that we'll be using in terms of packaging throughout our onstage and backstage areas. The first is a focus on temperature screening and entrance signage. Upon arrival, our guests will see specific signage reinforcing the enhanced safety and health messages they've heard throughout, including the requirements for entry. From a general safety signage, once inside, our guests will see additional messaging and reminders of the guidelines we expect our guests and cast members to practice. These will be deployed at all locations: retail, food and beverage, attractions, and other places where we expect lines could develop to assist guests in staying appropriately distanced. And then finally, the messaging and the graphics and the signage on physical distance is very, very important. We'll deploy these at all locations in all areas where there is a potential wait and communicate extensively throughout the resort that our social distancing, physical distancing standards are clear. Each of our entry points, each of our queue lines will have these entry signages marked throughout the queue lines and whatnot to ensure that guests have a clear understanding of the distances that we're asking them to maintain throughout their experience while here. So, as you all might imagine, there's been a great deal of work put in to get the Walt Disney World Resort and our cast members ready to reopen in this new environment for our July 11th opening. We've rethought many aspects of our operation to help enhance safety and provide a great guest experience. We're now implementing this work and proceeding with training and development so our cast are ready for the road ahead, and soon we will be welcoming our guests back. We believe this thoughtful, methodical, and phased ramp-up strategy for our property is the right path. Together, we hope everyone will do their part to bring the magic of Walt Disney World back into this new environment. Thank you very much for your time today. I'll turn it back over to you, Tim or George.
Very good. Thank you very much, Jim, for your presentation. Before we move into questions, we're going to have our third of three presentations. This one will be conducted by John Weiss, Director of Orange County's Planning, Environmental, and Development Services Department. Director Weiss will provide the results from the on-site inspection that was conducted at SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment and Walt Disney World. Thank you, John, and you're recognized.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman. Good morning to everyone on the call. As mentioned, I just wanted to provide a brief update regarding the site visits that were performed yesterday at two of the major amusement parks, both SeaWorld and Walt Disney World. Next slide, please. I think everybody's aware of the governor's order that requires each of these attractions to submit a plan. That plan should include both the proposed date for the resumption of operations, as well as guidelines focusing on both guest and staff safety. Mayor Demings had asked the team to be pulled together to perform a site visit with respect to ensure that each attraction both had the ability and was ready to implement the plan that they had submitted. And yesterday, Orange County staff was provided with copies of those reopening plans, as well as operating policies and procedures and manuals that were just presented to you. Next slide, please. The inspection team from yesterday included a few folks from the Orange County Health Department, both Michelle Prasad and Jennifer Finnegan, two of the epidemiologists that work very closely with Dr. Pino. We also had Dr. Christian Zuber, myself, and Shane Gerwig, Orange County building official, that made that site visit. And of course, thank you to the leadership team of both organizations for their time yesterday walking us through their park and their updated operation procedures. That was much appreciated. Basically, we reviewed the readiness of both of these organizations to implement their plan. That included both the wellness protocols for employees prior to coming to work and then once reporting. We also looked at the guest arrival process, including both parking, temperature checks, security, as well as the ticketing procedures as described. We looked at restaurant operations, including the separation of tables, and then also the mobile ordering and payment options that were being promoted with their guests. Looked at the queue management processes that they've outlined for attractions, and this included the ability and the requirements to maintain social distancing for the various parties of a variety of sizes that they're likely to encounter, as well as some of the operational changes that you would expect in seating, especially for some of the larger ride vehicles. And then, of course, the hand sanitizer stations that were evident throughout the park, and then the enhanced cleaning protocols for those high-touch surfaces, including the rides, handrails, and the restroom facilities. In summary then, basically staff did find that both SeaWorld Parks and Entertainment and Walt Disney World were ready to implement the plans that they both presented to you this morning to the task force. So with that, Orange County staff are available to answer any questions as well. Mr. Chairman, back to you. Would you be able to answer?
This is Jim McPhee. I'm happy to answer. You know, we've had the opportunity to be open at Disney Springs with the mask face coverings requirement now for a week. We have strong language that says they are required when you enter into the property. We have our social distancing squad in the area development that is politely but effectively encouraging our guests to keep the masks on. And we haven't encountered any specific issues over the course of the last week in which someone didn't comply. We're also looking at establishing relaxation zones in and around and off the property for people to go mask off for a moment. But all of our cast members on our social distancing squad understand the policy and are encouraging and persuading guests to ensure that they keep their masks on at all times.
Thank you, Jim.
Hi, and it's Mark from SeaWorld. Just to follow up, I think I would second a lot of what our friends at Disney said. You know, I think people recognize we live in a different time today, and we're anxious to provide a really safe product, and you know, optimistic that people will follow the procedures, but we'll have plenty of signage and plenty of reminders, and we'll encourage people to do that accordingly. And I think people just want to come out and have a good time at the theme park, and wearing a mask will be one of those parts of doing that.
Okay, thank you both.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate the answer.
Any other questions?
Tim, this is Jerry Demings. I don't have a question, but I do have just a quick comment. Let me just say to both of our parks here that have presented today, with the team from SeaWorld as well as the team from Walt Disney World, I do appreciate their thoroughness in preparing for reopening the various parks. They have exhibited a significant amount of due diligence in making certain that their desire to reopen and return commerce to their parks, they have also taken into consideration the safety of their guests. And so as a mayor of Orange County, I just want to say to them, thank you for being so thorough in your process. What you can see here is some consistency in how each of the parks have endeavored to approach this effort using the guidance of the Centers for Disease Control and the Florida Department of Health through this process. And I have to say also to my staff, they have worked really many hours to make certain that from a county oversight perspective that they have done their due diligence. And I have received the written correspondence from both my staff and from both, as well as SeaWorld and Disney to with their plan of action. And so the entire body has seen that today. And again, I appreciate the global effort of this Economic Recovery Task Force and taking time to also do their due diligence in reviewing this, and ultimately will make a recommendation one way or the other. So thank you to all parties involved.
Thank you, Mayor.
This is
Any further
Evelyn, and
questions?
I just have a comment. I recently heard of some restaurants doing contactless menu, which is a QR code, and so I'm not sure if that was considered for any of the parks. But with everybody carrying a cell phone nowadays, I think that's a good way to, you know, have something that people can look at the menu and not, you know, throw away like single-use menus and things like that. So.
Hi, this is Jim McPhee from Walt Disney World. As we shared with our team that visited the site yesterday, we do have the QR code capability accessible through the mobile device, and then on request, paper menus that would be disposed after use. But our goal with mobile order, QR code, et cetera, is to ensure that it's contactless throughout.
Yeah, this is Mark from SeaWorld. What I would kind of following on to your question, we've eliminated park maps as well, so you'll get those on your phone, and as you walk in, and get the map on your phone instead of a paper map, as another example of trying to make it contactless.
Thank you. Thank you.
I
Okay,
have
at this
a
time,
comment I'd like to make to the parks. Everybody keeps talking about these menus and throwing them away afterward. The CDC came out last week and said it's very hard to transmit the virus through surfaces, which was completely different than what we heard before. But does it not make sense, instead of throwing away thousands and thousands of menus a day and different things like that, since they say that the virus has a 3-day life, to collect all the menus at the end of it one day and then start using them on the 4th or 5th day again, and essentially recycling them within It just, to me, it doesn't make sense throwing all those away. I mean, they could simply be stored in a place and then recirculated every fourth day or so. But, yeah, it's just a suggestion over wasting lots of paper, and also for all the restaurants as well.
Thanks, George, Chuck, for your comment.
Yeah, hey Chuck, it's Mark. I can add a quick comment. I mean, for SeaWorld here, we just have the one restaurant that is really a sit-down restaurant where you would actually get a menu. The rest of our restaurants are largely, you know, a menu board or something like that. So I don't expect for us it'll be a whole lot of paper menus that we'll be discarding, but appreciate the comment, obviously.
Okay, at this time, we're going to look to move forward. We're going to actually take these two reopening plans separately as far as motions and voting so that we're able to allow members of the task force to abstain from individual votes as necessary. So at this time, do I have a motion to approve the SeaWorld reopening plan?
Martin's motions.
Thank you, Alex.
Bill Brown, second.
Thank you, Phil, for the second. Is there any further discussion on SeaWorld's reopening plan?
And now, Tim, this would be the appropriate time for those that need to recuse and/or abstain would do so.
Yes, thanks, Lucas. Just getting to that. So at this time, anyone that needs to abstain, please make that known.
Tim, good morning. This is Thomas Maslin from Walt Disney World. I will obviously abstain from voting. Thank you.
Tim, Chris Earl, United Safety Council. I will also abstain.
Thank you.
This is Rich Gonzalez from Universal, and I abstain from voting.
Thank you.
This is David Ward with Curly and Pin. I'll abstain.
Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, Brad Gilmore, SeaWorld, I will abstain.
Thanks, Brad.
Vincent Chu from Advent Health will be abstaining. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Vincent. Okay, hearing no further abstentions at this time, all those in support, please unmute and say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Thank you very much. At this time, all those opposed, please unmute and say aye. Okay, thank you. Please show the motion approved. We'll now move on to our second consideration for the Walt Disney World reopening plan. Do I have a motion on the floor?
Bill Brown, move approval.
Approve. Thank you, Phil.
Giordano,
second.
Giordano, second.
Dan, thank you for the second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, at this time, we'll also move forward with anyone that needs to abstain from the vote. Please indicate now.
Tim, good morning again. Thomas Maslin, Walt Disney World. I will abstain from voting.
Thanks, Tom.
This is Dan Wilcox from the YMCA. I'll abstain from voting.
Thank you, Dan.
Tim, Chris Earl, United Safety Council. I have to abstain from voting.
Thank you. Thanks, Chris.
And this is Alex Martins. Due to our partnership with the Walt Disney World Resort, I will be abstaining from voting.
Thank you, Alex.
John Newstreet, abstaining.
Hi, Tim. Brad Gilmore with SeaWorld.
Thank you. I got John and Brad on that.
And Vincent Chu, due to our relationship, I'll abstain as well.
Jerry Ross, National Entrepreneur Center, abstain.
Kathy Ramsberger, Dr. Phillips Center, abstaining.
Dan Ward, Curly and Pin, abstaining.
Thank you, Dan.
Rich Gonzalez from Universal, I abstain.
Thank you, Rich. Okay, at this time, all those members in support, please unmute and say aye.
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 Thank you very much. At this time, all those opposed, please unmute and say aye. Thank you. Please show the motion approved. And want to thank both SeaWorld and Walt Disney World for presenting to us and answering questions today. Obviously, a very thorough analysis and preparations have been made and are completely consistent with this group's charge to make sure that we safely reopen Orange County. So thank you all for your work and for the presentations today. And good luck on the reopening. We're all looking forward to it. At this time, I want to turn the agenda back over to George Agel.
Okay, thank you, Tim. We now move on to a presentation from our co-chairs of the Bringing Back Tourism Working Group. They've been very active, as many of you know, in hearing further presentations on due diligence from our smaller attractions. So with that now, I'd like to go ahead and turn it over to our co-chairs, Jesse Martinez, Dr. Yusheng Wang, on the proposed reopening plans submitted by our smaller attractions. And I thank you both, and you're recognized.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you. Yes, this morning we conducted our Bringing Back Tourism subcommittee meeting, and primary reason for the meeting was to hear two presentations, one from iFly Orlando and the other from Orlando Water Parks Complex on their reopening guidelines to reopen in the near future. After the presentations, very well thought out, we did speak with and confer with our medical professionals, along with the Orange County building inspector who inspected both facilities. And from that conversation, no one had any concerns on the reopening of these two facilities. After that, we did conduct a general question and answer with the task force and those who are also on the phone call. Again, great questions, and again, all answered. And we all felt that there was no concerns moving forward with their guidelines as presented. From that, we did vote. We felt that they met all the requirements of the governor's executive order. And at this time, we'd like to recommend the approval of this task force of the reopenings as presented for iFly Orlando and Orlando Water Parks Complex. Secondly, we did speak about a subject in regards to the Orange County Convention Center. We unanimously feel that getting this facility reopened is imperative to the success and economic recovery of Central Florida and primary international drive area. So we understand that Mayor Deming's, one of his top priorities is getting this facility reopened in an obviously thoughtful and healthy way. But we also want to make sure that we publicly announce that we'd like this to be a subject matter in the next task force meeting. With that, we did vote, and we are recommending as a task force that the Orange County Convention Center present at some time in the future their reopening plans, as we feel it's imperative to get them on the agenda as soon as possible. And that's all I have.
Okay, thank you, Jesse, and thank you to you, Dr. Wong, and your working group for the work you've been doing, again, to ensure that we have the opportunity to hear the recommendations on the opening of some of additional smaller attractions, as we say, for the purpose of this task force today. As we've done with the previously, we're going to ask again. I'm going to ask for Director White, from Orange County, again, to provide the results from the on-site inspection of our smaller attractions. So thank you, John. If you're recognized, if you could share that with us.
Mr. Agel, thank you. Just a couple quick slides here. I'll be brief with time. So as mentioned, we had two attractions that we performed site inspections on very recently, the iFly Orlando Complex and then the Orlando Water Sports Complex. Next slide here. One more, there we go. Both of those facilities were anxious to open up and had identified a date of May 28th, targeting to reopen. We did have that on-site inspection by a senior member of our Division of Building Safety team yesterday, very similar to other attractions, and that we performed that site visit and went through their employee health screening practices, employee training plans, sanitization procedures, signage, and any operational adjustments that they have or might have, including limiting closing rides, limiting capacity within their parks or various elements of their attractions. And I can conclude that both of those attractions did demonstrate their ability to implement the plan as they were presented to the committee earlier today. So, and again, just a reminder that there are additional steps for the reopenings. Obviously, beyond this task force recommendations, they would need to go from Mayor Demings to the governor's office ultimately for a final decision. So with that, Mr. Chairman, back to you.
Okay, thank you, John. Do we have any questions of Director Weiss on this report? All right, hearing none. We will now be taking up the recommendation from the Bringing Back Tourism Working Group, which you heard earlier. The recommendation that I will be looking for a motion and a second on is to approve the smaller attractions that were presented today, reopening plans as presented. Do I have a motion on that recommendation?
Motion for approval, Doug Taylor.
Jerry Ross, second.
Okay, moved by Doug Taylor, seconded by Jerry Ross. Very well. Any discussions on the motion at this time from members of the task? Okay, as earlier, if any task force members are abstaining from the vote with these two attractions, please let us know for the record. Do we have any abstentions on these two attractions that have been recommended for approval?
This is Thomas, Walt Disney World. Due to a conflict of interest, I abstain from voting.
Very good. Thank you, Thomas. Anyone else?
Yeah, Rich Gonzalez from Universal, and I abstain from voting also.
This is Wayne Rich. I have to abstain as well.
Very good. Anyone else?
SeaWorld, I'll abstain.
Dan Ward with Curly and Penn, I'll abstain.
Any other abstentions? Very well. Hearing none, we will now take a vote on the motion. As you did earlier, all members in favor of the motion at this time, please say
Aye. Aye.
aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, hearing.
Aye.
Very good. Okay, hearing no more on the motion to approve. All those opposed to the motion, please indicate with the same sign. Hearing no course again to the working committee.
Hey, George, can you repeat that? George, Mr. Chairman, your audio is cutting in and out. Okay, Tim, are you there?
Yes, I think we might have George back.
Yeah, I was
George,
back. I got disconnected.
Okay,
I'm back with you. Thank you.
thank you.
Okay, so I believe we're moving on to the consumer confidence survey results. Is that right, Lucas?
Yeah, we have at least two recommendations.
Do we need the second recommendation on the convention center?
I believe this has been up to the not only, but it's two.
Hey, Tim, George is having a back, so we might maybe.
Tim, I keep falling. Tim, I keep falling off, so I'm going to go ahead and turn this over to Tim to handle because I seem to be falling off.
It might be weather related.
Yeah, there is a weather situation here.
Yeah, mine is coming in
Okay,
and out.
so I believe at this point we need to go on to the convention center recommendation. Is that right, Lucas?
Recommendations to this?
Yes, sir. That's what we have shared on the screen right now.
Okay, very good. So at this time, we'll look for a motion to support the recommendation to have the Orange County Convention Center make a presentation to the full task force on their reopening plan.
So moved. Dan Wilcox.
So moved.
Thank you, Dan. And a second?
Cardenas, second.
Thank you, Evelyn. We have a motion and a second. Are there any further discussion? Hearing no further discussion at this point, as we did before, any of those that need to abstain from a vote, please indicate now. Okay, hearing none. All members in support, please unmute and say aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. At this time, all those opposed, please unmute and say aye. Hearing none, please show the recommendation approved by the full task force. Thank you, Jesse, for the presentation. At this time, next on the agenda, we have a presentation on the Consumer Confidence Survey results. It's going to be presented by Jason Reynolds, manager of the Neighborhood Services Division with Orange County. Jason, you're now recognized. Thank you for presenting.
Good afternoon, Mayor Demings and chairpersons of the Economic Recovery Task Force. It's a pleasure to be with you this morning to present the Consumer Confidence Survey and the outcomes of that survey. And the next slide, please. This is the outline for the presentation. We'll go through background, go through the questions and responses, and then any key findings. So to the background. This recommendation came out of the Business Compliance and Consumer Confidence Survey. And one of the things that we found is there are a number of discussions regarding community opening, and we see protests and we see social media posts and we see news articles, but there was not really a way to see just how the consumer, the residents of this community felt about reopening. One of the task force members spoke about a survey he did with some family and friends and just kind of gauge things, and the working group said, this is a good idea, let's advance something similar with the idea of really gauging the community's thoughts about patronizing business as the community begins to open, and then any kind of economic input from COVID-19. So we started out with the survey. It was translated into Spanish and Haitian Creole to make sure that it was inclusive as possible and as many people could participate. The survey opened on May 13th and closed on May 22nd. It was a very short window of time, but I wanted to commend our communications division for the work that they were able to do to push that survey out so quickly. As social media posts, emails to staff, and the population, it's important to note that the population is 1.4 million people, and we surveyed more than 1% of them. And from a statistical significance, and I'll talk about in regards to talking to a research statistician later about how that was important. And the map you see here goes to show where the responses were most prevalent. So the areas that are darker, that's Winter Garden, Horizon West area, they took more of the survey. And this is just to see where, just kind of a heat map of where people took the survey. So continuing on to questions and responses, the first question is obviously, what language do you write most fluently? This is just to kind of gauge where we are in terms of making sure we're reaching as many people as possible. Second is, how concerned are you about business enforcing social distancing guidelines and other COVID-19 prevention health protocols? Obviously, you see that the majority of the respondents are either very concerned, and when you add in their concern, that gets to about 65%. and she looked over the data and provided some high-level findings. One is consumers are comfortable patronizing businesses that take health and safety measures, and this is probably for any businesses who are looking to see what people are wanting to do. We see that people are comfortable when the patrons and the employees are using face coverings and temperature checks, and we saw that reflected earlier. The economic outlook, obviously things have changed in our community. We are not oblivious to people who are taking the survey, realizing that people are losing jobs, but there is a level of optimism, as we saw earlier. People are optimistic about the recovery and things changing positively in our community. And of course, consumer spending. Consumer spending has gone up in the short term, and that can be attributed to the increase in costs, and those are most likely groceries that people are having to pay for. So the results from this survey are going to be posted on the Economic Recovery Task Force page. I believe it's already there. In the place where it would typically say, take the survey, which is on the homepage on the right, you'll see that. And then an additional tool, working with the Fiscal and Operations Support Division within the Planning Environmental Services Department, Scott Scraven's team has developed a tool using ArcGIS Insights, which allows people to analyze the data. So for instance, you wanted to look at your particular zip code, 32801, and see how people were able to respond to the survey and to see what their feelings were in regards to reopening the community and their personal thoughts about the economy. That concludes the presentation about the survey results. I'm available to answer any additional questions.
Fantastic, Jason. I'm sure the first question you're going to get, I'll just go ahead and I'm assuming that this can all be sent to the task force so that they could go directly to those links and get Scott's insights available to them as well, right?
Certainly, yes. We can arrange that the presentation is sent and the link directing them to the ArcGIS Insights tool, so members and members, anyone from the general public, can analyze the data.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Very good presentation. A lot of insight there. Any questions from members of the task force?
Tim, this
Okay,
is Wayne
Jason.
Rich.
Yeah, Wayne.
He was going to relate it to the percentage of the respondents to the population.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, Mr. Rich, can you please repeat the question?
Yeah, I believe you said in your comments you were going to relate the percentage of respondents to the total population of Orange County in terms of being the size of the
We grouped all of the essentially retail shops. Shops is meant to be retail, which would encompass a nail spa, hair cuttery, Publix, Walgreens, Target. So we lump them together, and essentially retail and restaurants.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, this is Dan Jordan. I have a question for Jason, if I may.
Yeah, of course.
Hi, Jason. What is your plan about doing this survey again? Do you have a time frame? It's very, very insightful.
Thank you. There is a plan. A part of the survey response was asking people if they wanted to get a follow-up survey. So I believe we will discuss it internally about when would be the appropriate time to send the follow-up survey. And this would allow us to track the people who responded initially. And of course, we'd probably
I think has got the most cases, and that's, I mean, right now they've got the most cases, not before, was in lighter green. So do we have any idea of, for example, are we getting more responses from the zip codes that have been more impacted, more responses from zip codes that have been less impacted? Is there a socioeconomic link to survey respondents? Do we know any of that?
I can say that we can look at that data and see how those who responded in regards to the heat map areas that responded the most zip code, responded in each zip code the most as compared to areas where there are most cases. But I don't have right off the top of my head any kind of research about it, but we with the second round of survey, we will certainly keep that in mind to make sure that we are reaching as far as we can in terms of touching different segments of this community.
Dr. Cardenas, did you say that there was 14,000 people surveyed?
I heard two people talking. This is Jared Deming. So I wanted to respond to Dr. Cardenas' question real quickly here. In terms of if you can call it a heat map based on the response to the surveys, it really appears that it's more associated with density, where our population primarily lives in terms of the total number of responses and not regarding where we had cases. If you look at those zip codes, this is where we have large population bases within Orange County, which stands a reason why you will have more responses in many of those areas.
Thanks for that.
My question for you, was there 14,000 people surveyed?
We received the responses from 15,300 people.
Okay,
so it was sent all across the county. We received 15,000.
So to be accurate, that's not 1%, that's 0.01%. 1/10 of 1%.
Okay. We received 15,000 surveys. Yes.
Is there a breakdown on the survey age?
Yes, that information is available when you either can go online or when analyzing it further.
Thank you, Jason. I think at this point, just to make sure that we're remaining on track, knowing that you're going to send out the information and at the ARC Insights programs enables people to further digest the information and kind of cut it and slice it in different ways. Feel good about the information you've provided and give people the opportunity to kind of go another level deeper and certainly follow up with you with any questions that they might have. So thank you for the presentation, for all the great questions. I know it's very helpful. And at this time, I want to turn the agenda back over to George Agell.
Great, thank you, Tim, and thank you to all members of the task force. Thank you to Jason for your information also, all part of what's making this process successful. We now have an opportunity as task force members for open discussion. If there's anything else from today's presentations and information or any other thoughts that any member of the task force would like to leave or share with us, please, now would be the time. Feel free to unmute and share whatever you'd like with us today at this moment.
Well, this is Johnny Rivers. I'm very concerned about the restaurants opening and don't have a purification perspective, I think that more restaurants that's tied into a building versus a patio have greater challenges, regardless whether you have masks or not. I think that there's got to be a system that restaurants have, like medical centers, that can help kill some of the bacteria that exist in restaurants, that I think would make the consumer a lot safer. I have a USDA and FDA food production facility, and we constantly have masks and things that we wear to make sure from one department to the other. But it's just a thought that I think it'd be good if you had something that was in a purification system that went through the air condition, that went in and came out, that made it the atmosphere a little more safer. And I'm not a scientist, but it's just a thought. And
you know, it's a discussion. Appreciate that. Any other comments, thoughts from any other task force member at this time?
I field a lot of questions from clients and whatnot, asking what phase we're actually in and when we move to the next phase. Do we have communication or direction on that? I can share, or we can share?
Maybe I can go ahead and ask Orange County staff if there, I don't believe there's any current indications of that.
Currently, George, I'll jump in here. Currently, based on the governor's directive, we're in full phase one. So that's where we are in terms of phasing. When we go to phase two, that is an undetermined period of time at this point. We can't say precisely when that will be, but it could be within the next few weeks, and I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Mayor. Okay. Seeing we may not have any other comments from the task force, so with that, I will.
George?
Please, Lucas. The co-chair Tim to take us into next steps.
Thank you, George. Our next scheduled meeting of the full task force is Wednesday, June 3rd at 2 p.m. Just a reminder for the viewing public, all task force and working group meetings are streamed live on Orange TV, and public comment can be submitted to public.comment@ocfl.net before 5 p.m. the day prior to the task force or working group meeting. The information discussed at today's task force meeting will be made available on Orange County's Economic Recovery website at ocfl.net/economic recovery. I'll join George at this time in thanking all the members of the task force and all of our special presentations today. I think we walk away a lot more informed and confident of the steps that our theme parks and attractions are taking to further reopen Orange County, and we look forward to the presentation from the Orange County Convention Center at a future meeting. At this time, I'd like to recognize Mayor Demings for any closing comments he may have.
If you're like me, you probably found today's task force meeting very, very informative. I applaud all of our theme parks for their comprehensive reports today that clearly indicated a thoughtful and methodical reopen. I also hope that the information that was shared regarding confidence provides some level of feedback to all of our public about what the public expects to see as businesses reopen. We did receive a little better than 1%, and that 0.01 is a little better than 1% of the total population within Orange County responded to the survey, which is a very good response. We need that type of input as we make public policy decisions going forward. Also, I believe that the fact that the Economic Recovery Task Force that we have in place is broadly representative of our entire community. I do appreciate the community involvement and engagement in the process as we make decisions. And so really on behalf of the entire board of county commission, I do applaud all of you for your volunteer efforts in assisting us and establishing public policy here within Orange County. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you for your leadership. And I think we're progressing as we all had hoped as we move forward, and want to thank you all for your time. And we look forward to convening once again on Wednesday, June 3rd. Let's call this meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.